The meeting's now live.
Thank you very much. Would the monitoring officer care to give us the usual introduction on the legal admin side?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chairman. This is a very brief reminder with regards to procedures and behaviours. Many of our councillors are very well rehearsed and used to hearing the drill, but for those of you that are new, it might be helpful. So I'm just going to press the right button here. If everybody here could just make sure that their mobile phones and other devices are switched to silent if they are close to your proximity. Everyone during the meeting is responsible for managing their own microphone and by keeping it muted unless unmuting when invited to speak. If there are any technical issues with connectivity that mean you leave the meeting unintentionally, unfortunately, it could mean that you may have to abstain if we are voting on an item during this meeting. If you do lose connectivity, if you join the meeting, go back to the initial invitation on your calendar, in your Outlook calendar, and join the meeting in exactly the same way. If a councillor has an interest during this meeting and does not wish to attend or listen to a certain item agenda, then they need to just let us know and we can put them in the hosting room and in the waiting room and bring them back when and as they need to. Should the chairman wish to adjourn the meeting at any time, hopefully that won't happen, but some of our meetings have gone on in the past, and certainly the latest one, our subcommittee, you will be advised that the meeting is adjourned and the chairman will state when it will be reconvened. All participants are asked to remain in the meeting, but might have their microphones muted and also turn their videos off. And finally, as the chairman has already said, the meeting is live streamed. You will be heard and seen by members of the public. So it's important for all of us to behave professionally at all times. And also at the end of the meeting, it's worth just reminding everybody that there are a few seconds delay between the end of the meeting and when the live stream recording actually stops. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. And I remind the public particularly that this is not a public meeting, it is a meeting in public, which often seems a bit daft to say in a Zoom one, but anyway, some people even in Zoom from the public like to get involved and so on and so forth. The other thing, just to remind especially the new gentlemen who've joined us, if you wish to speak, you must use the blue hand. Do you both know the blue hand on the Zoom thingy-jiggy? Okay, all happy. Thank you very much. If you're having a problem, don't worry, just wave furiously and one of us will see us. We have several officers here with us today. I'll just introduce them. You already all heard the monitoring officer, Sharon Evans, speaking. We have Robert Baxendale from Legal Services. We have Laura Kelly from Legal Services. And we have Elizabeth Apoli from the Democratic Services, who's doing the administrative, secretarial, and the brilliant work in running the Zoom operations. We have two new members here. I wonder, Mike, if you would like to just give a very, very short synopsis of yourself, just to introduce yourself to the committee, please.
Yes, certainly, Councillor. Mike Rumble. Some of you may remember me from, worked for HDC between about 2000 and 2007, after which time I went off to seek my fortune in the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea. I retired from that about 2 years ago. And I suppose my most relevant contribution to this committee, I'm also on the committee of the Complaints Investigations Committee of the Chartered Management Institute. So I have got a very keen interest in standards and investigations. So that's really my background.
Thank you. Stephen, would you like to give a little brief intro?
Yes, I've lived in Sussex, West Sussex, for about 33 years now. And I had a career in the civil service, as well as sitting as a lay magistrate in West Sussex for over 22 years, now retired from both. And I've been a parish councillor for 2 years in Sachem Parish. That's my kind of quick background, if you like.
Thank you very much. Just for general information, particularly the new peoples, the Standards Committee is made up of 7 councillors based on a political balance. So we have 5 Conservatives and 2 Lib Dems. And then we're privileged to have, in terms of our constitution, we have 2 independent members, and we have 2 parish councils representatives. All 4 of them do not have a votability, but they're a very key and important part to our operations because they provide us with a neutral and balanced view on particularly complaints, and bring on board, of course, in the case of the parish reps and the others, specialized knowledge that helps to enforce what we've got. I won't ask people to introduce themselves. I'll quickly just run through the members. We have Councillor Karen Burgess. She sits here as chairman of the council, which is a constitutional requirement. Karen's extremely experienced councillor and has worked very satisfactorily as chairman of Planning North in the past. Councillor Jim Sanson is a very experienced parish councillor as well, and Jim is actually, in fact, chairman of licensing committee, which brings on board to this committee some skills which are particularly useful to our subcommittees, because licensing runs subcommittees where they look at complaints as well. Councillor van der Berg, Diana, is a lawyer, a long-serving member of councils in one form or another, and amongst other things is currently on the planning committee for the South Downs National Park. We have also Councillor Philip Circus, who is also a lawyer, and you all know I love getting free advice from lawyers, so I love having them on board, and so brings, of course, some qualities that are very important to our operations. He is also the cabinet member for the environment, and he has a substantial amount of councillor experience in many roles, both here and elsewhere, and in that sense probably is one of the longest serving councillors, such as I think Liz Kitchen's possibly our longest serving councillor. Claire Vickers is probably one of them. Godfrey Newman, as a Lib Dem member of this unit, is also a very long serving councillor. And of course, Alan Britton is also a Lib Dem member and a long serving councillor. And they all, I think, give us a very balanced and very successful in coming to decisions in matters which are very hard to come to decisions on. You know, they sometimes can go this way or that way. So sorry, chaps, long bit of a write-up, but I particularly thought it'd be useful, particularly if I had 2 new members, to stress the importance of their roles, the value we place it, and our thanks that they've come forward, you know, to do this. Right, let's go on to the agenda now. Item 1, apologies. It sounded like Councillor Newman possibly is making apologies, would you say?
Yes, we'll say apologies from Councillor Newman.
Okay, so he's the only one, right? You have at item 2 the minutes of the previous meeting. May I sign them as a true record unless there's any disagreement? All parties are happy. We will therefore sign the minutes as a true record. Item 3 are declarations of interest. Do any members have any declarations of interest that they wish to make? For the benefit of the new members, I'm sure you know what that means, but basically, if there was a matter where you had a financial interest or where you knew the parties very closely, maybe even relatives, you would have to declare that for obvious reasons in order to not be seen to be biased in any way, and often would have to recluse. In standards, this doesn't happen. That office in the planning committees, obviously it does. Item 4, announcements. I don't have any announcements. I don't think the officers have any announcements from anybody. Right. So we'll get straight on to item 5. If the monitoring officer would like to give us a standards update, please.
Thank you, Chairman. It's probably one of it almost sounds most exciting, but we've come to the Standards Committee after, and very quickly after a long subcommittee meeting where the committee had to look at we considered 4 complaints, and we considered those complaints at length. We had it was a full investigation, and summary was put together. We took the opinions from the parish representative and the independent person, and the subcommittee considered, as I said, 4 conduct complaints at length, and findings and decisions were made. I don't know if the chairman wants us to go over the decisions and give a little bit of detail, if that would be helpful, but it was after long consideration. A lot of work and a lot of resource had been put into those investigations, And it's as members that are here and sat on that subcommittee, it was felt that a lot of good work was done. We did find breaches on 3 of the complaints. There was 1 complaint where there was no finding of a breach of the code of conduct, but on 3 of the others there were various breaches that were found. Unfortunately, all of them were against the same councillor, and the complaints were also made by the same councillor. So it's unusual. It would sound unusual for other standards committees, but for us, unfortunately, it's not unusual that the complaints come from the same complainant, and unfortunately are again the same parish council. But yes, so we had 3 findings and 3 breaches, 3 complaints, and decisions were made and sanctions were decided. And there have been, I wouldn't say repercussions, but there has been feedback. I've received a lot of feedback. The decision notices and the sanctions that were chosen by this committee were harder than we've seen before. And we have received, including the chief exec, I think it's going all around the council, that we're making noise. People have heard that these breaches were made and sanctions were harsh, and a message is getting out there, Chairman. I don't know if my deputy, if Robert, wants to just go through some of the decisions that were made, but certainly I've heard for the very first time from Steyning councillors themselves and from members of the public. I've heard very, very positive emails congratulating the council and congratulating this subcommittee for those findings and those sanctions. And so, it's the message is getting out there, and I think it's important that the committee hears that. It's work that we've done. We had lots of paperwork. There were numerous bundles. There was a lot of work and a lot for us to go through. But a finding and decisions were made, and it seems to be making an impact. And on that note, Chairman, I'll hand over to Robert.
Sorry, just before you speak to Robert, I just noticed Phil's blue hand is up. Phil, did you want to say something?
Oh, sorry, Chairman. It was a silly point. I put my hand up simply to see if you could see it, because you mentioned a blue hand and my hand is yellow.
Yeah.
Thank you, Phil. Yes, that no problem. I mean, it's a wonderful system, this. Yes, Robert, thank you.
Yes, just to give a little bit more detail on those, the 3 cases where we did find breaches. In effect, in those 3 cases, there were 8 different breaches of the code of conduct. Some of them were the same, but in different cases. So in effect, it was treating others with respect, bringing the office into disrepute, not disclosing confidential information. There was the bullying one as well. And then in one matter, there was no finding of any breach at all. So in effect, over 3 complaints, there were sort of 8 different findings of a breach of the code of conduct. Just to give you an overview of other matters, sort of year to date, as it were. From the financial year 1st of April to today, there's been a total of 18 complaints that we've actually received, and these are fully fledged written complaints where the complaint form has been completed in detail. Out of those 18 complaints, 10 have been Steyning Parish Council, 5 Nuthurst Parish Council, and 1 each for West Grinstead, Henfield and Slinfold. Just as a comparison, last financial year we had 20 complaint cases, so we're heading more or less for exactly the same. If we look at last year, 12 of those cases were Steyning. We've heard that there might be 1 or 2 others coming in from Steyning in the very near future. So it does look as if we're comparable to last year. In relation to outstanding matters, we have 6 that are still outstanding. 4 of those are with Nutfield Parish Council. These are to be assessed. They've all come in relatively recently, and they are all connected and interlinked. So they will be being dealt with together, and I will be contacting independent person regarding these matters very soon. The other 2 outstanding matters, there's one for Stenning, which needed to be put on the back burner until we dealt with the recent cases. And then there's one for Slimfold, which has gone to investigation, and we are there. So that gives you an overview of sort of cases for this year. If anyone's got any questions.
Councillor Circus.
Chairman, I've got a serious question and a not so serious question. The serious question is, do we have within the standards regime something equivalent to declaring a complainant to be a vexatious litigant? I mean, Sharon will know that obviously in the courts it's possible to for somebody to be declared a vexatious litigant, because I'm very conscious of the fact that Sharon has a huge workload, and I know that standards complaints, rightly so, but nevertheless they involve a huge amount of work and responsibility for her. And I just wonder whether there is within the system any way that somebody can be declared a sort of standards equivalent of a vexatious litigant. And the not so serious question is, I wonder whether it would be useful if we co-opted Jackie Weaver onto the Standards Committee.
I'll come back to Jackie Weaver. The vexatious aspect has come across our minds on many occasions. Would the monitoring officer like to give us a legal point of view on it?
Thank you, Chairman. Within the legislation as it stands in the Localism Act, there isn't any guidance with regard to that. But what you would find, in my opinion, if the council, it would be very similar to the thinking and the way that our complaints procedure is dealt with. So if, again, the complainant comes again and again, it's the same complaint. There's nothing substantial or materially different with each complaint. Then again, myself and the chief exec, we and others that are involved, we make a decision and we decide that they have come to the end of the line, and we do use that word, it's vexatious. We will no longer carry on with communication. What we could do, there is no reason that the Standards Committee couldn't make that decision. I could probably, within the law, make that decision myself. What I would do, if we were likely to do that, I'd put it to the committee and again, put it the decision and get some backing from our members. But it is something that of course, it could, that decision could be made. I think if you can reasonably justify it, and again, the decision's not taken solely by officers, I think that again would help. But I wouldn't be surprised if, in the way that things are going, this new code that we're going to talk about shortly, and there's talk and reference of case law, commentary, more guidance. I wouldn't be surprised if we see something and we actually have guidance, and possibly when those changes come in the legislation that we've been waiting for, for some time now. I wouldn't be surprised if we see something in there. But yes, it is something that we have thought about and we have talked about. And, maybe we need to be robust enough and brave enough to use that. But I don't think there is anything in law to stop us. Again, if we are justified and reasonable in the approach we take, then yes, potentially we could, I think.
I presume, Sharon, that it would, if we declared somebody vexatious or decided somebody was vexatious, they would have a right of appeal. Well, I'm not quite sure what that right of appeal would be, but obviously they would have a right of appeal of some sort.
Yeah, we often say, and again, this is with in our process and our procedure, with our decision making, we say there is no right of appeal. And I think the chairman can go back to a time when we allowed appeal after appeal after appeal, and you know, practice has and time and resource has meant that no longer happens. But with regard to standards and our decision making, and our complaints and our decision notices, there is, and it has happened, that there is the ombudsman that can be used. And certainly with the new legislation, when that comes in, and the new sanctions, the ombudsman is that's where they will be going, and that is the plan, is that will be a definite standards complaint appeal system. It's not set up, and that isn't officially the place to go, but that is certainly where members of the public and councillors are going. And certainly in the last couple of months, the ombudsman have been prepared to make decisions on standard cases. But it's not set, and it's not within the legislation, but it is going that way. That is the plan. Thank you, Chair.
Before I bring Councillor van der Kloek in, may I just say, for the benefit of the new members, a complaint comes in, the monitoring officer and staff looks at it. The committee has empowered the monitoring officer and staff to attempt to resolve it at their level. Often some of these things can be resolved by a phone call, maybe some exchange of emails where perhaps misunderstandings took place. If the monitoring officer doesn't feel that it can be resolved at that level, that there is possibly grounds for a proper look at, we then form a subcommittee which is made up of 3 members of the committee, and that in both cases at the start and then, this is where the independent members and the parish reps may be called upon to give a representation. And certainly under some of the new regulations the past couple of years, the monitoring officer may now in fact ask them for views before moving to a subcommittee level. The vexatious thing, which Councillor Circus quite rightly raised, is a bit of a pain. And we were very generous 8-10 years ago when we set up a new standards committee regime under government's instructions. I think we were reasonably unusual in that we did you'd have a complaint come in, subcommittee would hear it, would throw it out, let's say. We then gave them a right of appeal. It meant the formation of another subcommittee, and to cut a long, boring story short, I eventually costed it out as about 100,000 a year. It was just ridiculous. So we threw out the appeal process. And we don't have an appeal process. As the monitoring officer says, if people feel unhappy with the decisions or what's happened, they can go to the ombudsman. Though the ombudsman will only look at process, I believe. He won't actually look at the content of it. So that's where we stand at the moment. Councillor van der Kloek, sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to ask about the decision notices that had been made in relation to the 3 breaches of the Code of Conduct that were found by the recent subcommittee. And I just wanted to know whether the decision notices were dealt with in any way differently from how we've dealt with them previously, and whether the sanctions that were imposed were in any way different from sanctions we've previously imposed. I'm expecting the answer to be no, because there's no reason why they should be treated differently, because we haven't adopted the new Code of Conduct yet, and also the government hasn't passed its legislation to take on board the recommendations of the Committee on Standards in Public Life about new sanctions which can be imposed. So it was just that the monitoring officer said that there had been a lot of positive feedback, sounding as if previously there hadn't been positive feedback when we found breaches and made decisions. And I wondered if there'd been any ways it'd been handled differently, or the sanctions had been in any way different. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. The sanctions that the sanctions were, I suppose, harder than what we've used before, and it's simply because when we came to the end of the complaint and the subcommittee meeting, we found ourselves with 3 cases where breaches were found, and I think as my colleague Robert has already said, it was 8 breaches in totality from the same councillor. So it was therefore felt that the committee would look at the sanction holistically with regard to what sanctions were imposed. And that's the only difference, really. We've never found ourselves, not certainly since I've been here, Chairman, and Councillor van der Kloot, where we've had the same individual involved in so many cases where breaches have been found. So that's really the difference that I'm talking about. So it does seem that the committee was probably more robust than usual, but again, we've never been in that, certainly since I've been here in the last 3 years, we've never been in a circumstance where we've had so many breaches of the code made by the same particular individual. So we use sanctions that have always been available to us, but it was a holistic, more of a holistic approach. I think I'm right, Chairman, and I think I'm right, Robert, and that's merely the difference that I'm talking about. Thank you.
Thank you. And if I could just come back with just one further point, what was the name of the councillor who was found to have been liable for the breaches? Was his name put in the public domain? Because I know we were discussing this, the minutes say that we discussed this at our last meeting. The committee discussed the possibility of publishing decision notices where a breach had occurred, so that the name of the councillor would be in the public domain. But I don't think we ever resolved anything on that. So was the name of the councillor here made public?
Thank you, Chairman. If I could just answer, and Robert can obviously assist if I've got my facts wrong. We fed back to the subject member, the member complained about, and also the complainant with regard to the decision notices. We know, and I know, that within minutes of I think probably, I hope I'm not exaggerating, but certainly what has been reported to me is that within minutes of those notices going to those individuals, they did end up in the public domain. So they've ended up in the public domain, not from the council, not from this committee, and not from actions from HDC. If I remember rightly, I think one of the sanctions was to publicise, but I don't believe that we've actioned that yet. Is that right, Rob?
If I can add, one of the sanctions was to publish the decision notice, and that is still within the sanctions that are available to us and have always been available to us. So in effect, as I understand it, the decision notice have been published and are available on Modern Gov. I think Democratic Services will be able to confirm if that's the case.
Yes, the 4 decision the 4 decision notices have been published on the on our public website in the pages which have the all the details about the different council meetings. They're published in the same place as the agenda for the meeting is available to the public, and the minutes as well.
And can I just add, it's now regarded as best practice, and we will no doubt come to this when we're looking at the new code of conduct. But when a local authority does make a decision on an allegation of misconduct after a full investigation, and a decision notice is made, it is best practice to publish that now. So it's out there now that we really ought to be doing that. Thank you, Chair.
Well, thank you very much, Andrew. That was very useful. And sorry if I say it again, for the benefit of the new members, the all councils and all council standards committees, before Eric Pickles became an MP, had some very powerful sanctions that they could use against parties who'd breached the normal practice that the councillors should follow. And the big ones, of course, were to suspend them from their councils without allowances. And this applies, by the way, not just to parish councillors, to district councillors as well. So there were sanctions, there were teeth. MP Pickles came in and he reviewed the whole standards protocol. He did away with Standards England, and he took away those teeth. I just don't understand why he did it. And that has weakened the Standards Committee in putting sanctions on parties who've broken the rules, in effect. We've slowly but steadily, and as you've seen now, strengthened them as the law has been slightly changed or changed. In other words, publicizing the names, instructing or asking the parish to actually suspend the peoples from committee work and committee equipment for 3 months. And I think this is, and I'm pretty certain that this particular council, where they've had a huge amount of unrest for, gosh, 8-10 years, it's very, very sad. And that if people are not behaving properly, we like to think that, you know, these sanctions we put down are getting the message through. And as the monitoring officers just said, the response to it appears to be showing that, you know, we are making a wee bit of progress, but we'll have to see over the next few months. Councillor Jim Sampson.
Thank you, Chairman. After I was given an update by Robert on the sanctions, I checked the Stenning website and they were on there then. So they've been made public on their website.
Mm.
Oh, thank you, Jim. That's very useful, and I mean that's what we expected. And I think it's on-job training, as you know. I always love to use that expression, which I do believe very firmly in, and it's getting a message out, and hopefully it will help to start to stabilize that particular parish. Councillor Circus mentioned a particular lady whose video at a parish council meeting got lots of viewings on YouTube. I mean, that's obviously an extremely extreme case, but it happens. I mean, with the best will in the world, you know, every one of us gets a little bit upset about this or not, and next thing and do things daft. But hopefully a message is going out now. So, Robert, are you now finished?
Yes, Chair. Unless there's any questions.
Any other questions from any members? Yes, the monitoring officer.
Thank you, Chairman. It's really a kind of a point of order, and Councillor van der Kloot is absolutely right with regard to going forward for all of our decision notices. We at the previous subcommittee the previous committee back in I think it was November, we had a conversation with regard to what we decide going forward for all of our decision notices, whether we publish and put them in the public domain. The sanction for the subcommittee and the finding last week, that was the publishing was part of the sanction, which was slightly different, but we certainly spoke at our last committee meeting that it was a decision that we needed to take, and we needed to make that decision and have a vote on whether we felt it was right for this council going forward to publish unredacted our decision notices for all findings. Now that would be all decision notices. Now that could mean where there is no finding of a breach, and would certainly mean where there is a finding of a breach. And that's something that this committee does need to think on and certainly have a vote and decide whether that's the way that we need to go. And certainly, as Robert has already pointed out, it comes from the long-standing report and the findings again from the LGA, the best practice that's out there. We have 15 recommendations that have come and we need to follow. And on that, it actually talks about the publishing of our decision notices. But as Councillor van der Kloot has said, going forward, we need to make that decision as a committee. Thank you, Chairman.
Would you like us to vote on that now?
If members are ready to, and unless they needed more information, more time, but absolutely, it's up to you, Chairman.
I'll take you just now, Councillor van der Kloek. Councillor Sanson, you did have your hand up just now. Do you wish to comment? You're muted. You're muted.
First of all, I'm stupid. Secondly, you guys are going exactly where I want to go, so there's no point me adding to this.
Thank you very much. Councillor van der Kloek.
Thank you. I just wanted to just respond to something that the monitoring officer said, and that was going back to the minutes of the last meeting, which I've just got it up here in front of me. I think that what we were considering at that last meeting was not the possibility taking a vote, not on the possibility of publishing all decision notices, but just decision notices where a breach had occurred. And I think Sharon, you were saying that we were considering resolving to publish all decision notices, so that there is a slight difference there. And perhaps, you know, we need to have a little bit more time to consider what it is we do want to vote on before we vote on it.
I can see a point of not publishing where there was no breach, because even that can have a harmful effect on a party. You know, the old expression is something sticks, you know, that sort of story.
Yeah.
Right, let's hear a few more viewpoints. We've got Councillor Philip Circus and then Stephen Watkins.
I would have thought it would be a good idea to give us all a chance to reflect on this. I think there are various issues involved in publication and the extent to which we should publish, if at all. And I would suggest we put it on the agenda for the next meeting of the Standards Committee to give us time to reflect on this. I mean, in today's world of the internet, the problem with adjudications that, you know, get publicized on the internet is they're a bit like space junk. They are there for all eternity, unless you use the rather cumbersome rights under the General Data Protection Regulations. The right, it's called the right to be, I think it's called the right to be ignored. There is a procedure whereby you can actually apply to have items about your personal history removed from the internet, but it is a cumbersome procedure. There is a right of appeal to the Information Commissioner, but what I'm saying is there are implications. It's not like you put something into a newspaper and it's a 9-day wonder. In today's world, it goes onto the internet and it stays there for a very long time, and it can have quite adverse effects on somebody's career in local government. So I think rather than rush to a judgment on the issue now, I think it would be wise to put it on the agenda for the next meeting, and let's reflect on it and perhaps have some thoughts from the monitoring officer.
Thank you. Councillor Watkins?
Yes, I'd be a little unhappy about having a vote now without having more information. I mean, one thing that came to mind was, if it was published, would that include the penalty that was decided upon? And the other thing, touching on what Councillor Circus has said, is that there could be a big difference between publishing all decisions and perhaps restricting publication to ones where the penalty was more severe. I mean, otherwise you're capturing a huge, well, not a huge, but a number of cases. You know, I'd just like a bit more information. Perhaps something could be put together to consider at the next meeting.
Thank you very much. Yes, I think all that's all sound stuff that's been said. The big factor though is to have a deterrent, and as I said earlier, our problem, and the problem for all standards committee throughout the land, I guess, for the past 5-10 years maybe, is there has not been a strong enough deterrent. But I think there's some good points made there, and I think and we will therefore minute this, and we will therefore put it onto the next agenda. The monitoring officer will prepare a short paper on it, the pros and cons, and the way forward, and the reason for it, and it'll give us an opportunity to go into it in depth. Anybody else have any other points on that matter? No other points on that matter. Robert, are you finished now on your segment?
Yes, Chair, thank you.
And monitoring officer, have you anything else to say on the standards update, or do we move on?
No, I think we're ready to move on. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. If you can take us now into standard agenda item 6, model code of conduct.
Thank you, Chairman. As this committee knows, and we've talked before, all councils are required to have a local member code of conduct, and we obviously have our existing code that I think has been, I think it came from the previous constitution. I don't think it was updated at that time. So it's been around for a while, but it is very much the same model code that all of our neighbouring councils were using up until very, very recently. Again, this committee knows very, very well that the Local Government Association, the LGA, produced a new model code of conduct, and this was put out for consultation back in the summer. And again, this committee fed into that consultation. They put the responses together and produced a final draft of the new code. I think we've circulated it before, and it's attached with these agenda papers. And it's marked, I think, in the papers and found at Appendix A. I apologise, Chairman, because for some crazy reason I'm losing my voice. I haven't been talking very much this morning, so I don't know why. But yeah, so please bear with me. I seem to be losing my voice. But anyway, I will do my best to carry on. So the LGA consulted, as we know, the stakeholders. They examined the good practice in local government, and not just in local government, but other professions as well. They also intend, we haven't seen it yet, but they intend to create some additional guidance, working examples, and I keep talking about it, commentary and explanatory text in due course. We haven't quite got it. Again, I think COVID, we keep on saying this, there's always something. I think it was kind of Brexit and the general election. Now we've got COVID and the pandemic that's been delaying all of this that we've been so desperately waiting for. But they put everything together. They're taking into account the additional sanctions that were recommended from, as Councillor van der Kloot has already mentioned, the Committee on Standards in Public Life, and they've generated and put together the new code. Again, we don't have the sanctions yet because the legislation hasn't caught up with it, but we will, and hopefully we will get there, certainly in my time, I hope, as a monitoring officer here at Horsham. So what they've done, they've sought to address issues arising, this committee has talked about this on so many times, arising through more communication that's taking place remotely, online, between members and residents, and particularly the troubles that members get themselves into with social media. Again, we put in the report, and as this committee knows, it tends to be, it's not just the parish councils, but at the moment the parish councils seem to be the ones that are getting themselves into trouble at this current time, particularly with social media. Remote, it's not just social media, but the actual meetings themselves, the remote meetings. Rob and I have been involved fairly recently with things that have been going on, the Jackie Weavers meetings that are taking place. So with this in mind, the new code has been designed to protect members in their democratic role and to encourage good conduct and again, safeguard the public's trust in local government. They are focused upon setting high standards and expecting demonstrable good conduct. Again, it's you all know, and luckily all of our committee members are very, very good with regard to their conduct. I'm very, very lucky being the monitoring officer for Horsham District Council with our district councillors. And again, we will get there with our parish councils, but it is taking some work. So with this in mind, they've put the new code together. It does talk about, in line with the 7 principles of public life that we all know about: selflessness, integrity, objectivity, accountability, openness, honesty, and leadership. And it sets out the specific obligations that should be followed. Now, what we've done, and some work has been put in, we've got Appendix B, and that shows the kind of comparisons between the new code and our existing code at the moment. Now, one of the main reasons, and again, this committee has talked about it considerably, and it comes up. One of the reasons for adopting the code is that ultimately the parish councils will adopt the same code and will have this uniformed approach. At the moment, it is open to parish councils and obviously us as a council to bespoke our code of conduct. And we find obviously the parish representatives, the independent persons, will realise also that our parish councils, and quite a few of them, have their own specific and bespoke code of conduct, that when it comes to looking whether a breach of the members' code has taken place, we have to look to that one specifically. So we don't have this one fits all, unfortunately. And the idea is that all principals authorities will adopt this new code, and then parish councils will follow through. Now, there is talk about legislation that will make that mandatory for the parish councils, but that is not in place at this current time. So one of the main reasons for adopting the code, and we've talked about this has come up, and again, when we talk about the hours that go into dealing with standards, and the standards team, the amount of resource that it takes, it is considered that we're dealing with standards complaints in the future against the national model code. Given that relevant guidance and the working examples, the explanatory commentary text that should be coming, and the case law, it would enable complaints to be dealt with much quicker and much more easily. And again, it then goes on to say, the report says that if the parishes follow, we will all be looking at the one code, and again, it will make life so much more easier. Then I was going to take us over to the code itself, and on page 15, it gives some of the detail and the differences, really, the application of this code, and how it's different. What it does do within the code of conduct that the one that we have, our current one, doesn't do, is it actually tells you when the code applies. And this is our starting point with any of our complaints. Is the member actually acting in capacity as a councillor? And it has been grey and it has been vague. It sounds ridiculous, but just the starting point. Were they actually acting as a councillor in the capacity when the breach was made? But in this code, it does give us some guidance. So it points that out. When you're claiming, when you give the impression, when you publicly refer to your role as a councillor, so that catches the social media when the name is there on the posting. And it applies to, it says in here, it applies to all forms of communication and interaction. And again, it gives some detail, which we've never had before. So it talks about face-to-face meetings, telephone calls, written communication, verbal, non-verbal, and it includes emails. It spells it out there. And it also says it includes social media communications, posts, statements, and comments. And again, we've not had this explicitly written out before. So it's helpful to see it there. The other thing that it does is that it talks about bullying, harassment, discrimination. Obviously, it's no different from before. You must not bully, you must not harass, and you must promote the qualities. But it gives some guidance. It tells you what it looks to the ACAS and how that they characterise bullying. It gives some wording: offensive, intimidating, malicious, insulting behaviour, humiliating. And it talks about it might be a regular pattern of behaviour, it might be a one-off incident, face-to-face, social media. So again, and it goes down, it defines harassment for us, talks about discrimination and the Equality Act. So there's much more detail in here, and much more for us to, well, members to follow, but on looking at standards, there's more for us to actually pin our evidence and our behaviours on. So I know that when we've certainly looked at it at the consultation stage, there were things that we weren't happy about, but certainly on looking at it and comparing it to what we've got already, I have to say, with regards to the standards team and the assessing of complaints, it certainly would make things easier for us. And I also think as members, it's written for you, and it's written in that tone and that tense. I think it's more helpful, and it actually gives more detail into what is expected of you and the behaviours that are acceptable. And again, I'm just going on to see, I think it's quite helpful for the registering of interests and the declaring of interest too. I don't know if members have taken the time, but I thought that was perfect. And certainly when we go into planning committee and any of our meetings, the way that it's set out is far better than what we've got in our constitution as it stands. So I was very pleased to see that in there. Again, it gives detail with regard to when we're filling out our register of interest, that it's helpful, and the guidance is there and it's been needed. And so I think really, Chairman, it's for me to say, I think it's an improvement. It may not have gone as far as we wanted it to go, but it's certainly, in my opinion, Chairman, it's an improvement as to what we've got at the moment, and therefore it's for you as members to consider whether this is the code that we want to adopt, and make a decision on that. So I'll pass back to you, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. We have to make a decision at this meeting because we'll have to make a recommendation to full council. Councillor Circus.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got a few comments. The first comment is it's quite common with codes of practice to have a statement that the code will be administered and applied in the spirit as well as in the letter. And I don't know whether we would want such a provision. There are some, looking at the LGA model code, there are some grammatical problems in one or two places, and also there's a word missing in 7.2, or at least there is in this copy. Also, if you look at bullying, harassment and discrimination, it says in 2.3, I promote equalities and do not, I don't know how you promote equalities rather than equality, but I promote equalities and do not discriminate unlawfully against any person. I think that should be confined to I do not discriminate unlawfully against any person. Because the trouble with promoting, I'm not quite sure what as councillors we're supposed to do to promote equality if it isn't to engage in positive discrimination. Which I'm sure you will agree, Chairman, positive discrimination is the very opposite of equality. And I don't want to be tied to a commitment to basically act against the principle of equality, which I suggest that if those words mean anything, it's possible they don't mean anything. They're just words that people thought looked attractive. The other point I wanted to make is in relation to gifts and hospitality. I wonder whether in 10.1, I wonder whether the monitoring officer, she and I have spent our lives looking at words and trying to work out what they mean and whether they add something to the meaning. But in this second line, which could give rise to real or substantive personal gain, I'm not sure what substantive in this context means, or whether it basically is tautologous and is just simply repeating in another word the word real. That doesn't, if it doesn't seem totally clear to me as a lawyer, I'm not sure it will be totally clear to members generally. So I wonder whether the monitoring officer could give us, I don't think that particular bit of the model code is a model of clarity. So I just wonder, Chairman, before we sort of put a seal of approval on this, I wonder whether, you know, there are one or two points which I personally would like to see considered, and if thought appropriate, some one or two changes made, whether we should do that before we put the seal of approval on this and recommend it to council. Thank you, Chairman.
Monitoring officer.
Thank you, Chairman. We certainly can, and obviously knowing our councillors and knowing this committee, it doesn't surprise me that there are, and I remember certainly when this went out to consultation, there were some of the tense and some of the language used, we weren't all overly impressed. I do remember that. So it doesn't surprise me, Councillor Serkis, and that things are being picked up. And I agree with you, you know, it's got the two words there, could give rise to real or substantive, either or. Again, I don't know. There are some oddities for sure. And I know we did pick them up. And this is an opportunity, if, you know, we don't need to make it painful, but we need to make it right. And if we want it to have some meaning, and if we want to be able to, again, look at the code and decide whether people have breached it or not, we do really need to know what it truly means, and what we're expecting. So I don't personally have a problem with us making certain tweaks if we feel that it's not clear or if it's unhelpful. I don't have a problem with that, and it doesn't surprise me that our members here might want to do that. So I'll pass back to you, Chairman.
Councillor van der Kloot.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I agree with Councillor Serkis. There are still a few mistakes here. We all remember the draft that was put out for consultation was incredibly shoddy, and we were quite dismayed by it. This is a vast improvement, but there are still 4 mistakes of a grammatical nature and a word missing. So I can provide details of those. And one of them was, well, 2 of them were the ones mentioned by Councillor Serkis. I think that it is a vast improvement, and I think there is much to be commended in adopting this code of conduct in place of the one we have at the moment, because it will ensure a consistent and uniform approach at national level, and also if it is adopted by parish councils, and I understand that they don't have to, it would also provide consistency at local level. And also it will enable us to look at national guidance and explanation as to what the words mean, and also any case law. So, I mean, although we're saying that some of the words at the moment are perhaps unclear, what is a real and what substantial gift, you know, that's the sort of thing that might be clarified in notes by the local government association, and it will, by adopting it, it will make dealing with complaints much quicker and easier. As the monitoring officer said, we won't have to interpret different codes of conduct every time we're looking at a complaint. So there's something to be said for adopting it as it stands and hoping that any areas that are a little bit vague will be clarified by footnotes or explanatory text. And the other thing, the advantage of it is it's going to be reviewed annually, so that will be done by the local government association to ensure it's fit for purpose. And it will therefore take into account changes in technology and social media, as well as in legislation. And there'll also be support and training provided by the LGA to councillors in the application of the code. And this will all make life much easier for us, and particularly the monitoring officer, in dealing with complaints and upholding standards more efficiently. I agreed with the monitoring officer that the section on registering and declaring interest was much more easy to follow than the one we have currently in our code. I think the monitoring officer points out in her report, but didn't mention just now, that there is one drawback in that it doesn't deal with the procedure for a councillor obtaining dispensation in relation to participation in meetings where they have an interest or a prejudicial interest. That's not dealt with at all in the LGA code. And I thought that the comparison that the officers dealt with in the report between the new code and our current code is very helpful. And it highlights that although the standards are comparable in the two codes, there's much more helpful explanation in the LGA new code, explaining what bullying means, for example. So, you know, I'm very much in favour of adopting the new code. I do slightly concerned by the points raised by Councillor Serkis, but it could well be that is dealt with by footnotes and explanation by the LGA, particularly if we make submissions to them to do that. So that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
So other than supporting Councillor Serkis's proposals for change, you don't have any specific from yourself?
No, I don't have any specific point.
Thank you.
Change, apart from the 4 grammatical mistakes or missing words.
Yeah, okay. Councillor Sanson.
Thank you, Chairman. I think my microphone's on. Page 27, there's something there, best practice 6. Sharon, explain to me what that would look like, because when I read through it, I'm not really understanding what that would look like. Thank you. Page 27, best practice 6.
Okay.
Council should publish a clear and straightforward public interest test against which allegations are filtered. Yeah, lovely words.
So we don't publish, but we have a public interest test that when we're looking at the complaints that we would adhere to as it stands. So what we would need to do, councils would publish a clear and straightforward public interest test against which allegations are filtered. So we would have to, it's the way of working out whether this is in the public interest to pursue the matter, and we would have to do it, we would have to be able to show how we deliberate and how that decision is made. So it's similar for public prosecutions, and as a prosecutor, you know, spending many years prosecuting, I had to, every case I took, I had to look at the public interest test and justify my reason for either pursuing or not pursuing. And it's similar to what we do already with our standards complaints, but we would have to put this in writing and show what we follow, what we look at, how we make that decision and how it's determined. And we would have to have that in the public domain and as part of our process and our procedure for dealing with standards complaint and upholding code of conduct. So it's something that we would have to put forward. Again, as we've said, more and more recently, we're getting closer to getting to a point of publishing our new standards complaint procedure. Again, we've said that we've got many loopholes, and well, not loopholes. We've got it's not as concise and clear as it could be. We almost make ourselves jump through more hoops than we need to. And in putting that process together, this is something that we would have to have as part of our process, and we would publish it on our website. So it would just be what we look at, how the decision is made, whether it is right for us to continue, is it in the public interest, and the considerations and decisions that are looked at and taken into account when we make the decision to continue. So if that helps, Jim, I think it will be part of our complaints procedure, and it will be posted on our website.
Yeah, it answers most of it, but the area which worries me all the time is social media.
Do you mean as in the conduct on social media, or
both conduct and use of social media? What is and isn't acceptable? I read through this, but when you publish it, it's got to be pretty tight what you're actually going to publish, because social media moves on all the time.
Well, if it's necessary to change, we will change, as has already been said.
Yeah.
It's going to be reviewed annually anyway. And if any member or any party, either within council or outside, does highlight something that's remiss, well, we can obviously take steps to update it. But it's going to be reviewed every year anyway. So I presume, even though technology moves faster than us, well, I can't accuse any of you of that, certainly faster than me, shall we say. We should then obviously take appropriate action, Jim. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Independent person, Rumble.
Chairman, both are myself as independent person and our other independent person last week attended the conference of independent persons, which surprisingly enough this year was held on Zoom. And that was quite interesting in that Howie Ainscough and company, who were running the conference, were also tasked with writing this code for the LGA. So they did stress that they were still open for comment. The actual good practice guidance that is accompanying it, they're hoping to have finished by the end of April, beginning of May. But as that they were keen to point out that they were open for comments on that and improvements. So no doubt has to be fed through the LGA, but it's still open for business.
Thank you. That's quite useful. And Councillor Circus.
Thank you, Chairman. I think Councillor van der Kloot is right that what is here is better than it was. But it seems to me some key changes need to be made, and they're not difficult changes to make, before I, for one, would regard it as acceptable. If this came to me either in Cabinet or in Council, I will not vote for it as it stands. If you take, for example, on the drafting, if you take 10.1, which I drew attention to, this is the gifts and hospitality. I mean, that could so easily be improved by simply deleting a number of words. So it says, I do not accept gifts or hospitality, irrespective of estimated value, which could give rise to a reasonable suspicion of influence on my part to show favour. You know, there are very easy changes you could make, which would make the principle shine through, which it doesn't with the sort of gobbledygook you've got at the moment. The thing I'm not prepared to sign up to in any circumstances is 2.3. You will remember, Chairman, the debate we had on Black Lives Matter, and you will remember those members in council who said, in effect, we should be engaging in positive discrimination. And of course, our response to that, or the administration's response to that, was positive discrimination is the very opposite of equality. I sign up wholeheartedly to the principle of equality. The law requires us to sign up to equality, but there is no way, Chairman, I am going to sign up to words which look to me like an invitation to engage in positive discrimination. The problem is, if you leave these words in, Chairman, it will not be long before somebody says members have actually committed themselves to engaging in some form of positive discrimination. And for that reason, I could not support this draft code.
Thank you. Well, what I suggest we do, I mean, there's no urgency to get it into the Constitution, or is there, Sharon?
No, Chairman. It would, if we were going, it would be nice to have it for the municipal year, to have it in place. But we're not district councillors are not going to into election. One of the things that it says in the code is that on signing your declaration, the annual declaration, you are accepting the code. So for new starters and new members, it would have been good, but you know, we're not really pressed for time. It is just something that if we can do it, it would be good to have done, and hopefully our new procedure for standards could come at the same time as well. So there is no.
So what I think is that Councillor Circus and Councillor van der Kloek, with their legal expertise, are very good at studying words and seeing double meanings. May I suggest that probably you work with them with a view to seeing what amendments are required. Now, can we accelerate everything to try and get it through before the new year? I mean, can we vote by email to accept a final draft within a few weeks?
Chairman, we could convene a meeting if we needed
to.
Convene
a Zoom meeting, yes. It's not.
Yes.
It's not going to take long, because I'm sure Councillor Circus and van der Kloek will be delighted to assist in fine-tuning this. And I think if you and the Democratic Service Officer, Liz, could have a look at when we could have a meeting. I don't think it should be a long meeting. I mean, no more than 30 minutes. I mean, bear in mind, will all have been circulated with the draft, reflecting the changes, showing the old and the new, so that everybody can see what's been done. And it should be a fairly straightforward vote. It shouldn't take at all long. In fact, provided we've got a quorum. What's the quorum on 7? I think, is it 3, Liz? 7 members. A quorum would be what?
It's a quarter.
A quarter.
It's a quarter, yes. So.
Oh, good. 1.7. Okay, 2 people. You can see I'm a banker. I can't work these things out. Anyway, okay. Monitoring officer, are you happy with that?
Yes, Chairman, I am. And I want to I was just doing a little chat box to everybody just to say, unfortunately, I'm going to have to leave the meeting. I
do understand that. That's why I was trying to.
really give my apologies. This has not happened before.
No. Not every one of us are sympathetic, please. And I was very conscious of it. I didn't want to remind anybody in case they felt I was rushing them. But just a quick round. Is everybody then happy with that way forward? Yes, everybody's happy. I think it's giving it a really good bash. At the end of the day, it's not the finished item, because it will be reviewed annually anyway. And as with any piece of legislation or our constitution, it's always open to change. So that's what's going to happen. Then monitoring officer will liaise with Councillor van der Kloeg and Councillor Circus, knock up a draft, which they are happy with, and Sharon's happy with, and the lawyers are happy with, and we'll have a very brief meeting, Zoom meeting, arranged hopefully within the next 2-3 weeks, so that we can get it into the Constitution before the new year. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, Sharon. All the very best.
I'm going to
Yes,
leave you and leave.
and sorry to delay you so long.
No, not at all. Thank you.
Yeah, okay.
Bye-bye.
Right. Okay. So I think that looks satisfactory. I think that's good diligence and governance. I don't think there's any need to discuss any further. I do thank the eminent councils for their inputs there. It's very valuable to all of us. But I mean, as you know, the spoken word is a never-ending, changing picture. So that then ends item
6.
Number 6. Item 7. There's no urgent business, except that I was remiss, and I'll do it now. I wonder if independent person John Donaldson could just give a little intro of himself to the 2 new members of the committee. Apologies, and I'm coming to Philip next. You're muted, John.
Can you hear me now?
Thank you, John. Yes.
Yes, I've been on the Standards Committee for probably now 6 years. I've been involved with numerous cases here. My background is I worked for Environment Agency, National Rivers Authority, and I did a lot of auditing work as well in my time. And I also am an independent person with West Sussex and South Downs National Park. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And Parish Rep Phil Baxter. And you're muted, Phil.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. As the other parish reps will probably know, I'm a parish rep. I'm chairman of Shipley Parish Council and currently vice chairman of Horsham Association of Local Councils, which august body, of course, elects us or recommends us for these posts. My background was quite a long time actually in the civil service, followed with a couple of other jobs, and I'm now spending most of my time involved with parish council and similar activities. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. And I didn't introduce myself. Apologies. I've been on the council 18 years. I've probably chaired almost every committee on the council. I've been cabinet member of finance. I've also been cabinet member for health and leisure, and I shouldn't tell anybody, international banker, which is, I'm told by the lawyers, worse than a lawyer. Anyway, there we are. Just one last little thing for the new members, by the way, as well. Do liaise with Sharon about training requirements, updates, briefings. She's very, very available, as is Robert, to bring you up to speed in respect to your role. And may I also suggest you probably network with in the case of Mike, with John Donaldson, the case of Stephen with Phil Baxter, informally on the phone, just have a little chat and just say, you know, how do you find it? What do you do? It might also be useful if you can get copies of some of the work they've done, some of the opinions they've provided, and you can see the format. In fact, I would probably suggest you get those, say, from Sharon. Just say to Sharon, is it possible to get some copies of previous advices, just to give you an idea of where it's gone, etc., etc. And I think that's about it. So I do thank everybody for the meeting. I thought it was a very good debate, particularly on the new protocols. And I think it looks good. I think, as we've all agreed, it does look like a good step forward. But to get, and for the benefit of the new members again, you know, we do want some more teeth in our protocols. And it has been delayed, as Sharon said, by the election, then the Brexit thing, and of course the coronavirus. So this type of work has been on the back burner at government. But that's what we do need, is some more teeth. So thank you very much, everybody, for your attendance. And we'll see you briefly in a couple of weeks' time, when hopefully we can firm up on that new protocol with the help of 2 members, or the other members. Every one of you, of course, can make an input. And we can then table it at full council, hopefully in the next month, so that it'll be live for the new council year. So thank you very much. And thank you again to all the officers and to Liz for all their help in setting this up.
Yeah,
yes, you've got something to say, Phil?
Just before we go, can I just, I think this is probably directed at Robert more than anyone. I seem to have quite a lot of what I would regard as confidential paperwork as a consequence of the previous cases that we've dealt with. I don't really want to keep it. How best can one dispose of it? Assuming that you agree that we should dispose of it.
Yes. Oh yeah. Shred it or tear it into many pieces.
Okay.
Shred, tear, you know. Yes, I agree. I mean, the new members are going to be shocked by the size, I think, of some of the bundles. These officers do an amazing job. And in actual fact, as I always say, it's great on-job training. You know, if you do have a bundle to look at eventually at some stage, it's fantastic learning process for every one of us. You know, man, it's always man, it's not the woman. Mankind is amazing at twisting and turning the rules, etc. Okay, yeah, it's a good point. A lot of people don't read. If you are in the council offices, you can also give it to one of the officers and they will put it into the confidential shredding basket. But otherwise, you know, use your own shredder or just tear it into little pieces. You know, gives your fingers some exercise. So thank you very much to everybody for attending, and hope you enjoyed.